All right, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Tamargo. I'm the Director of Finance. I am a young Gen Y, and in classic Gen Y/millennial fashion, I get my news 2 weeks later after TikTok once it's finally uploaded to Instagram.
And welcome, my name is Brent. I'm Director of Influencer Strategy with our CJI team, and I am also a millennial, which means I publicly ranked my top 8 friends on MySpace in high school, and you will never catch me wearing high-rise socks. No show socks for life.
So these two millennials are gonna walk you all through the who, the why, and how of Gen Z.
Awesome. So if we're gonna talk about Gen Z, we should probably define who exactly it is that we're talking about. So Gen Z was born between 1997 and
Yikes.
2012. So that puts them between the ages of 12 and 27. There are just shy of 70 million members of Gen Z, which makes them the third most populated generation in the US behind baby boomers and millennials. Interesting fact though, millennials and Gen Z already outpopulate Gen X and baby boomers. So they have sort of taken over as the most populated generations in the country. So that's all interesting, cool numbers. Who are they really, right? What makes them unique? What nuances sort of describe them? We could spend all talking about this. So I'll just give a few high points. Gen Z is a really passionate generation. They're really motivated by values, social issues, political issues. They are motivated by social status and recognition. Probably no surprise there as being the first generation who grew up on social media under a digital spotlight. Politically speaking, they are very polarized. They tend to skew further towards the end of the spectrum than kind of having any centrist positions. And they're also more difficult to categorize into traditional political parties than previous generations, right? They tend to skew much further left on social and environmental issues, but interestingly, there's a large fraction of them that tend to lean a little bit more right on things like economic issues, so they don't fit into those traditional paradigms that we're used to. What I think is maybe the most interesting aspect of Gen Z is their status as the first digitally native generation. What I mean by that is, Kathy and I as millennials, we had an entire lifetime pre-social media. It wasn't until I entered my early 20s that Facebook kind of came onto the scene. And Gen Z, when they were in that phase of their life approaching adolescence, platforms like Facebook, Instagram, they were already well established on the scene. They grew up on those platforms. And as the second wave of social media sort of kicked off with newer platforms like Snapchat and TikTok, they were the early adopters for those platforms, and they were filling those channels with content. So as a result of all of that, social media, digital content is really ingrained in their DNA. That makes them highly digitally literate. And for brands and marketers, that poses a pretty big challenge when it comes to reaching Gen Z, because they don't just know the game, they kind of created the game, right? So brands have to get really clever and tricky with how they message Gen Z in order to form those authentic connections.
And just to visualize that a little bit, have you guys seen those TikTok? Well, I haven't seen the TikToks, I've seen the Instagrams of the different generations on a different side of the door, and it's like, dial a phone, and the rest of us are like, and Gen Z is just like, so very different.
So reaching them is kind of a pain in the ass. So before we get into how we do that, I'm going to let Kathy tell us why it's going to be worth the effort.
Exactly. Now, we tried our best to narrow down the stats as much as possible, but they are so compelling that we will walk through a lot of them, so please bear with me. They are very, very important. If Gen Z is not a top priority for you all today, I strongly recommend, I insist that they become a priority now. They are on the cusp of becoming a powerhouse in consumer spending. So we talked a little bit about the population size. Currently, the older Gen Z are maturing in their careers, while younger Gen Z is aging into the workforce. Some of the stats that he mentioned cover off on how they are poised to overtake baby boomers by 2029. That's tomorrow, pretty much. So we need to be focusing on them now. That represents $12 trillion. That's not a made-up number. We can show you the stats. $12 trillion in consumer spending, which is a 2,500% increase from the $450 billion in spending power today in 2024. So they are a high priority. Move on to the next. And the beauty of Gen Z is that they are spending now. They are spending on experiences, they are spending on connections. So now that doesn't mean that this only applies to, say, travel brands. No, it means that brands that traditionally waited to market to different populations after they hit certain milestones in terms of disposable income and things like that need to start doing that sooner, because again, not only are they ready, but they are spending. Next slide, please. They're also, like Brent mentioned, a really passionate bunch. 68% of Gen Z are willing to pay 50 to 100% more on products that are eco-friendly, sustainable. They're also more likely to spend with brands that have a reputation for treating their employees well. And over a third of them have actually reported participating in at least one boycott of a brand in the past year. Next slide, please. So fostering these connections is really important. Gaining their trust is absolutely critical. Again, they value authenticity and connection. So the trick to this generation is meeting them where they are with a message that aligns with their values and their needs. Next slide. So these are all some pretty heavy numbers. 46% of Gen Z prefers social search over traditional search engines. 43% of Gen Z is likely to start product research on TikTok. And then a whopping 85%, that number just cannot be ignored, says that social media directly impacts their purchasing decisions. Finally, Gen Z, they trust influencers more than they trust brands. Generally speaking, 92% of people trust other people more than they trust other brands, and 82% of people trust what influencers have to say about brands more than what brands have to say about themselves. So clearly, influencers are the gateway to reaching this audience. So now, I'll pass it over to Brent so he can walk us through the how. How are we going to do this?
Hopefully everyone is really excited to get a piece of that $12 trillion spending
trillion.
power. But I'm here to be the wet blanket and remind you that it's really, really difficult to capture Gen Z's attention. These are some of the challenges that brands face when it comes to connecting with Gen Z. They really value authenticity. So how do you take your marketing messages and translate them into a language that Gen Z is going to respond to in order to earn that brand loyalty? Something about Gen Z is they are everywhere. You know, they are on every social platform. Their attention is more fragmented than any generation before them. It's a huge challenge for brands because that means you have to essentially create a unique content strategy for every social platform and every audience niche you're looking to reach. A very sort of labor-intensive challenge that brands have to contend with. And on top of that, they have short attention spans. They're constantly moving through trends as fast as brands can try to keep up. The pace is so fast that connecting with them and responding to the things that they're interested in the moment is tremendously difficult. The good news is that our sort of assertion is that brands don't have to, nor really should they be, trying to tackle these issues on their own. As Kathy mentioned, influencers can be the gateway to connecting to Gen Z. So a lot of brands, even today, tend to view influencer marketing through a straw. At CJ, with our CJI team, we tend to take a very full funnel view of what influencer marketing actually means, starting with engaging influencers as strategic partners to not only use them as that conduit to reach their audiences, but also to sort of reverse that conversation flow and learn from them, tap into the insights that they can provide to us as marketers based on the connections, the intimate connections that they have with those that follow them, right? They are the ones who are engaging with these communities every single day. They're fielding questions, seeking feedback in their DMs from their followers all the time. And we can gain a tremendous amount of insight to inform not only our influencer marketing strategies, but really top-line brand strategies as well. Of course, we know that there's no one better for connecting to niche audiences than influencers. Many of them are also tremendously talented content creators. More and more, we're seeing brands that are tapping into their influencer partnerships to supply them with creative assets to use on their websites, on their own brand social channels, and things of that nature, even more so than going to sort of a traditional creative agency. Because number one, that content tends to connect to their audiences better, and it's more cost effective to work with influencers in that capacity than traditional agencies. Of course, there's other tactics that we can employ, things like paid amplification, right? When we have these creative assets, boosting them out to bigger and broader audiences is a really cost-effective way to gain additional value out of those assets. And finally, we're seeing more and more brands kind of move towards these always-on ambassador social affiliate programs that are really designed to incentivize and motivate influencers to guide their followers through the purchasing funnel and really convert into customers as a result of the connections they're making via content. So let's take a look at a couple of example strategies. Let's say you are a travel brand, right? You want to connect with audiences that are seeking travel recommendations, things like destinations, hotels, flight trackers, things of that nature. And so there are whole communities of travel influencers, lifestyle creators that have built personal brands around being the experts that can share that type of educational and informational content with their audiences. Some of the platforms that type of content tends to be really popular on include obviously Instagram, TikTok, even Snapchat, for instance. And so influencers can help connect with those very niche sort of subcategories of those audiences that are passionate about those issues that exist on each of those individual platforms. Then you can even take sort of a needs-based approach to the actual messaging and the content itself, right? So those audiences are seeking inspiration, they're seeking practical tips and advice, and the influencers, as the authority on those subjects, can be the ones to deliver that content from a place of authenticity and authority. So that means things like aspirational content, again, like I said, recommendations and reviews. Shifting gears entirely, let's say you are a bank or a credit card provider, and you want to tap into Gen Z to help set them up for their financial futures. There is a whole community of finfluencers out there. These are financial experts that share their tips for budgeting and even investing and things like that to help set their followers up financially for the future. We see this area is exploding in influencer marketing as more and more finance brands begin to catch up with the influencer space. You also have more sort of ground level influencers that can reach those types of audiences, right? These Gen Zs who have entered the workforce and have started to share their experiences as young professionals. And even on the younger side, students, right, who are trying to choose their career paths and things of that nature. These are great ways and great lenses through which to reach this valuable audience in a way that's going to appeal to the things that they're interested in and the information they're seeking now from these creators. So those are, I think, a little bit more commercially obvious ways to engage with influencers, but let's not forget about their values, Gen Z's brand values, right? They really value eco-friendly brands. They really value brands who aren't afraid to take a stance on societal issues, social issues, things of that nature. So there are also influencers who are very passionate that educate themselves and pass that information on to their followers around which brands their followers can feel good about supporting. And so, for instance, I don't know if anybody was present at yesterday's keynote session, but I personally was very moved to learn about the Working with Cancer initiative that Publicis has launched and supports. There are brands more and more commonly that are launching those types of social programs, and influencers can be the ones that sort of communicate what those brands are doing and those investments that these brands are making to the audiences that we know are going to be really passionate about that and are going to then support those brands with their purchasing power. So maybe now we've convinced you that you need to be reaching Gen Z and influencers are the way to do that. I don't know if anybody has experience in the influencer channel. If not, and you're looking to start an influencer program, these are some kind of basic tips to get started, right? So it's really important to establish your goals. So many times we speak to brands who know they want to get into influencer, but they haven't really thought through what they want their influencer partnerships to accomplish. That is priority number one is you really need to be intentional about how you want to deploy these partnerships in order to impact the KPIs that you're looking for. So whether that's brand awareness, whether that's sort of mid-funnel KPIs like improving brand perception or educating followers about a specific product, or even lower funnel metrics like driving sales and conversions. It's really important to know what you're trying to do so that you can create a strategy to accomplish that. You want to identify and recruit qualified key opinion leaders and tastemakers. What I mean by that, really more than anything, is prioritize their POV, prioritize their expertise more so than their follower count. Follower count has never been less important in influencer marketing than it is right now. The way that algorithms have advanced, TikTok and Instagram in particular, they are so good at serving the right content to the audiences that they know that content is going to resonate with, that the number of followers an influencer has actually has less and less bearing on how many people are actually going to see that content. So again, prioritize the POV, prioritize the perspective, the subject matter expertise, because again, Gen Z cares about authenticity more than anything else. So you want to make sure you're partnering with people who can speak to them authentically. Lastly, test, measure, iterate, measure every single thing that you can from your influencer programs, because that will allow you to get better and better with your campaigns as you go along. Which kind of leads me into the next slide here, which is maybe you already have an influencer program set up and you're looking for some tips on how to sort of get more value out of that, or how to optimize it and drive some additional impact from those partnerships. So refine and optimize your roster constantly. This is not a set it and forget it channel. It really takes a lot of connection and a lot of retooling, re-strategizing. That should be happening all the time as you acquire more data and more inputs to inform your strategy. You should adjust your strategies to reflect that. I kind of mentioned this already, but we nearly always recommend boosting influencer content. There's simply no reason not to do it 9 times out of 10, especially when you are investing so much in these partnerships and the assets that the partnerships are creating. Use those assets everywhere you can. Secure licensing rights from those creators so that you can republish that content on brand channels. Boost that content through paid social to amplify its reach to new audiences. Once you have them in hand, you want to get as much value as you can out of those assets. Getting in, I've mentioned measurement before. There are ways to measure every stage of the funnel, right? Whether it's reach, awareness, engagement at the top of the funnel, or sales, traffic, and conversions at the bottom of the funnel, and then sort of that murky middle of the funnel range where you're talking about improving brand perception and sentiment and things of that nature. We always recommend deploying brand lift studies alongside your influencer campaigns so that you can really kind of measure how that influencer content is impacting how audiences are thinking about your brand, how they feel about your brand, and whether you've sort of moved them towards a purchase, even if they're not quite ready to click and purchase today. Did you guide them through that funnel? Leveraging trackable CTAs to measure that bottom of the funnel campaign impact. That's something that CJ, I think, excels at better than anyone else. Our roots are in the affiliate space where every click, every conversion matters. And so we've really been able to apply that expertise to the influencer channel that traditionally, I think, has existed more towards the top of the funnel in terms of how marketers are thinking about it, but it can be a bottom of the funnel channel as well if you have the right measurement capabilities in place. And finally, nurture and grow those influencer relationships. Something that I think is so unique about the influencer channel is it is such a human channel. It's a channel of people recommending, connecting with other people, and that starts with the relationship between the brand and the influencer, and it extends through the relationship between the influencer and the audience. So those relationships need to be nurtured. Listen to your creator partners, bring them into the fold, seek their feedback, listen to their recommendations. That's the best way to get the most out of those partnerships and to set them up for success in order to be able to deploy content that's going to accomplish your goals. So, a couple of quick takeaways. The time to prioritize Gen Z is right now. As Kathy kind of walked us through, the opportunity presented to brands by this generation is simply too great to not be doing this today. We know that it's particularly hard. Gen Z is a difficult generation to connect with, and so you really need to reevaluate your strategies, right? The strategies that worked not too long ago, even for us millennials, they really aren't as effective as connecting with Gen Z, and you need to evaluate how you're messaging them, how you're communicating with them. And lastly, our assertion is that influencers should at least be a part of those new strategies. There's no one better that can be the translators for brands to speak Gen Z's language than influencers. So with that, we have about 4 minutes left, it looks like, I think. So happy to take any questions if there are any.